On this Sunday night, the head of Hockey Canada's board steps down. Days after her defiant testimony.
I can assure the members of the Canadian public that change is happening.
Scapegoat or first step in real change? Hacktivists interrupt Iran's leader on state TV. As more families mourn their daughters. The deer debate in Quebec.
I don't want to see these beautiful animals slaughtered.
The problem of overpopulation and calls for a cull. And a Ukrainian family's first Thanksgiving in Canada.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Hockey Canada has been under the national microscope for months. Its leadership targeted by titans of corporate Canada, citizens, parents, players, even the Prime Minister. Now, a development. The interim chair of the board, Andrea Skinner, has resigned 4 days after her defensive testimony in front of a committee examining the handling of sexual abuse allegations. As David Akin reports, MPs and others believe this resignation should be just the first of many in a complete overhaul of Hockey Canada's leadership.
An investigation was ongoing.
On Tuesday, before a parliamentary committee, Andrea Skinner was speaking up for Hockey Canada.
I can assure this committee and I can assure the members of the Canadian public that change is happening.
She defended the practice of using non-disclosure agreements to deal with allegations of sexual abuse.
We decided to resolve the matter in a way that was trauma-centered, victim-centered, or complainant-centered.
And she argued Hockey Canada's CEO and senior management should not be replaced.
There is a significant risk to the organization if all of the board resigns and all of senior leadership is no longer there. I think that will be very impactful in a negative way to our boys and girls who are playing hockey. Will the lights stay on the rink? I don't know.
But to many, Skinner's comments to stick with management only made things worse.
I hope that they understand the message and leave before they burn it to the ground.
By Saturday, Skinner at least had got the message. Upon reflection, she said, "It is clear to me from recent events that it no longer makes sense for me to continue."
I certainly understand why she stepped down. I think Tuesday was a disastrous hearing for Hockey Canada. But at the same time, I know that the crisis in Hockey Canada is even more acute. This is the second board chair that they have lost in 2 months.
So Hockey Canada is now seeking a new chair and seeking new members for its board of directors. New leaders, it says, must be, quote, committed to a cultural evolution for the organization. Nomination forms are at hockeycanada.ca. The deadline to apply is October 28th. David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
Another sign of the growing anger in Iran against that country's authoritarian regime. State TV there was hacked late Saturday by a group calling out Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. A news bulletin was interrupted by an anonymous-like mask, followed by an image of the Supreme Leader with flames around him and with a target on his head. It also included photos of 4 women killed in recent protests. The interruption lasted only a few seconds, and the camera cut back to a seemingly shocked news anchor, though some have questioned whether this was an inside job. There have been mass protests in cities across Iran and around the world this weekend, including here in Canada. Passionate protesters gathered again in Toronto this afternoon. This is the 4th week of worldwide demonstrations that followed the death of Mahsa Amini in Iranian police custody. She was arrested last month for wearing what was deemed to be inappropriate attire, and she died 3 days later. Now, there have been many protests since the revolution more than 4 decades ago, but none this long or widespread. As Nigar Moshtahedi reports, art, music, and social media are playing a major role in raising awareness and keeping the movement alive.
A song that has become the unofficial anthem of one of the biggest uprisings Iran has seen in decades. The artist Shervin Hajipour spent days behind bars after his song Baraye, meaning because of in English, got hundreds of millions of retweets. His lyrics based on tweets by Iranians of their grievances against the regime. each sentence starting with "because of."
Sherin's song really moved me. This is kind of actually unique, you know, because what we see is a way of sharing the grievances of a large population by using the power of internet and the tools that the internet provides.
Siavash Rokni, an expert on Iranian pop culture and social media, says Hajipur's song is one of the greatest examples on how Iranians are using social media to mobilize their voices and to catalog what is happening inside their country.
Immediately we see this, citizen journalism that's happening in Iran that is very informed by what the reporters need to know.
And reports emerging of several teenage girls dying at the hands of Iran's security forces. This is Serena Esmailzadeh. During happier times. Now allegations she was beaten to death for protesting for basic freedoms. Her story similar to that of Nika Shah Karami, a teenager who joined protests on September 20th. According to the Oslo-based group Iran Human Rights, she was also killed, the regime vehemently denying that. And Hadis Najafi, 23 years old, reportedly killed, shot multiple times during protests. Their stories would be untold had it not been for the sharing of information online.
You can stop them slowly and you can suppress them temporarily, but that doesn't stop them from continuing to share and circulate.
Also emerging from the tragedy, art in the form of resistance. Graphic designers from around the world drawing attention to the cause through a form of protest art. But Rokni warns that social media has a short attention span and persistence is key to keeping the movement alive. Negar Moshtehedi, Global News.
To the war in Ukraine now. A Russian missile strike on the city of Zaporizhzhia has killed at least 13 people, injuring many others, including children. This comes a day after that huge explosion damaged the Kerch bridge between Crimea and Russia, the cause of which is still uncertain. But Russian President Vladimir Putin is blaming Ukraine for an act of terror, and that's raising more worries about what he'll do next. Redmond Shannon reports.
Traffic snakes back for up to 8 kilometres. Drivers attempting to leave Crimea on the remaining lanes of the Kerch bridge. The queue of cars at least partly down to traffic limits along the intact lanes of the bridge. Trucks are now forced to use ferries as teams inspect the damage. Saturday's explosion destroyed one section of road and spread to rail cars. Russia says some train traffic has resumed, but it's difficult to verify footage released by Russian state media.
While we're still waiting to see the full impact, Russia clearly has to think twice about using this bridge.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says Ukraine is to blame for what he calls a terror attack on the structure. It was built after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014.
This bridge was perhaps the pinnacle of Russia's symbolism for having control over Crimea, for trying to force Ukraine under Russian domination. And that symbol has gone up literally in smoke.
Ukraine has not claimed responsibility. Theories abound that Kyiv may have used a high-spec US missile or even a drone boat like this one reportedly found in Crimea last month. The bridge is a key supply route for Russia's military, particularly as it looks to hold off Ukrainian advances in Kherson region. With Russian troops being pushed back, there are concerns about what Putin's reaction will be. He's recently made thinly veiled threats about using nuclear weapons. But perhaps one indication was seen in Zaporizhzhia Sunday. More deaths in the Ukrainian city after a missile attack on a civilian area. The second such attack in 3 days. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Canada's Federal Housing Agency is sounding the alarm on affordable housing. It's warning that unless urgent, proactive measures are taken by all levels of government, we won't be able to build enough housing to meet demand. And Gaviola explains why labor shortages are at the heart of the issue.
Even though some of the steam has come out of the housing market, affordability will continue to be a problem unless drastic measures are taken quickly. That's the takeaway from a new report from Canada's Federal Housing Agency.
problems are most acute in Ontario. That shouldn't come as a great surprise, but also in BC and to a lesser extent in Alberta and Quebec.
We don't have enough construction industry workers to build the 3.5 million additional homes needed in the next 8 years to meaningfully improve affordability.
We will have to more than double our maximum capacity at the current rates in order to achieve that.
Crews have become more efficient during the pandemic, building more with less people, but the industry is stretched.
It's not all doom and gloom. In 2020 and 2021, what we did find were that essentially most sites and in the construction sector was making do with fewer people and producing more units.
CMHC offers solutions including more high-density construction, stepping up renovations and conversions of existing buildings to create new homes, increasing Canada's already lofty immigration targets to bring in workers with the skills needed to build, and attracting more young people to the industry. All levels of government will need to be involved, as well as private sector developers. And it's not just about building more units. Dwellings must be suitable for people's needs.
A lot of these condo units that are being built, particularly in places like Toronto or Vancouver, are small, and they're not really catering for families with children, more space. So that's going to be a challenge.
Labor shortages aren't unique to construction. Similar issues plague the hospitality and healthcare industries. Economists say this will weigh on growth.
It's likely costing our economy something in the neighborhood of more than $50 billion of economic activity.
Deloitte is forecasting a short recession by year's end. The silver lining, companies say they're reluctant to lay off workers, even if there is an economic downturn, for fear of not being able to hire them back when things improve. Worker scarcity equals job security. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Across Canada, 21 people each day are dying due to toxic drugs and overdoses. For years, BC has been the epicenter of that crisis. Now statistics show there is a disturbing new trend. Overdoses from smoked drugs are on the rise. Neethu Kerch explains the new challenges that poses for advocates who want to help.
It's one of Vancouver's oldest neighborhoods where tragically some of the newest innovations in BC's response to the overdose epidemic are born.
People are using it in the alley or they're using it in the back alley.
Drug policy advisor Karen Ward says she sees firsthand the need for more adaptation to the trend seen over the last 6 years towards smoking.
They're vaping off foil. They're vaporizing the substance and inhaling the smoke.
And the downtown east side is at the epicenter of the epidemic.
We should be obviously mandating safer smoking rooms in public buildings.
While there are multiple supervised injection sites, there's only one safe inhalation site in this area. And some, like this Indigenous outreach worker, say that's not enough.
I've actually seen people smoking just outside the safe injection sites, doing their best to be safe as possible. When they're injecting, the infections will come. I think that's where the trend started, where they started smoking.
The latest figures from the BC Coroner Service show smoking is the most used mode of consumption, leading to toxic drug deaths across BC. In some regions, these inhaled doses cause a vast majority of the fatalities, such as 74% of overdose deaths in the province's northern interior last year.
They've been slower to open inhalation sites because in those cold climates, they have the necessity to have ventilation, safety for workers is compounded by the climate.
BC's Minister of Mental Health and Addiction says they're constantly looking for new approaches, especially as the country's first jurisdiction to decriminalize drug use and permitting the prescription of safe supply.
This hasn't been done before, and so we're learning as we go. We're funding every health authority to stand inhalation supervised consumption sites up. And honestly, we just have got our heads down every day on designing new ways to tackle this crisis.
All right, love you. Be safe.
James Harry Sr. says for his people who were disproportionately affected by the crisis, a culturally appropriate response is critical.
Knowing that they got a little taste of home, just a little taste, right? And that goes a long way.
as many of those on the front lines continue to be relied upon to inform the next steps in the evolving response. Neetu Garsha, Global News, Vancouver.
Coming up, North Korea's neighbors respond to its latest missile tests, and Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister pays a rare visit to the region. North Korea fired 2 more missiles into the sea, the latest in a blitz of weapons tests in recent days. Hours later, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly, currently on a visit to South Korea and Japan, made a rare trip to the demilitarized zone. From the fortified border between the 2 Koreas, Joly tweeted, "I was struck by what it represents. It separates freedom from oppression, prosperity from hardship. In many ways, it is a symbol of peace, but also of its fragility." She's the latest in a string of leaders to visit the zone in recent weeks, including U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. This weekend's launch comes after the U.S. and South Korea wrapped up a new round of naval drills off the Korean peninsula. Pyongyang says these drills are threatening regional security. But as Jennifer Johnson reports, the U.S. is not backing down.
A new round of military drills between the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan and South Korean warships has drawn sharp criticism from North Korea's defense ministry, calling them provocative and threatening. But the U.S. is defending the exercises.
We're going to make sure that we have the capabilities in place to defend our national security interests if it comes to that.
The U.S., Japan, and South Korean military drills come as North Korea fires powerful missiles over Japan, 2 on Sunday and 1 last Tuesday that went farther than ever before, triggering alerts warning residents to prepare to evacuate and anger from the U.S.
The United States condemns these actions.
In the past 2 weeks, North Korea has fired multiple ballistic missiles into the sea, adding to its record number of weapons tests this year. North Korea says it is building up its nuclear program to respond to U.S. threats, concerning military analysts that a future nuclear attack is a real possibility.
His research and development is moving along, and so it's more likely that he has this capability. I think in the end it comes down to, will he ever use it?
The U.S. and South Korea have repeatedly said they have no plans to attack the North. But North Korea isn't buying that, as it embarks on a major escalation and public show of its potential nuclear power. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Ahead, the challenging choices over too many deer in a Quebec park. Animal rights advocates are promising to continue to fight a Quebec municipality's plan to cull its deer population at a park outside Montreal. Mike Armstrong explains.
It isn't that anyone considers the deer in this park to be pests. It's more of a too much of a good thing situation, but much too much.
Well, I don't want to see these beautiful animals slaughtered.
The city of Longueuil's controversial solution to its deer overpopulation problem is an organized cull. The plan is to shut the park down for a few days and send in hunters with crossbows.
They're very cute and everything, but I don't see any choice.
Michel Chartrand Park isn't big. It's only about 2 square kilometers. Large enough, according to the city, for 10 to 15 deer. The herd's blown past that. Things started to be a problem back in 2017 when the population was at 20. 4 years later, it ballooned to 72 deer, and as of this summer, it was 108. Now, there's been a battle brewing for a few years over what to do. The city's argued the cull is needed. The deer are too domesticated to be moved, too dangerous to vehicles in the area, and are eating too much vegetation.
If we want to save and protect the park, we need to do this now. We can't wait many more years, otherwise we're just going to lose the park.
Animal rights groups took the city to court last week, asking a judge to suspend the planned cull. The decision came Monday, the judge siding with the city.
We're not quite ready to give up.
2 different groups now say they'll appeal, the Montreal SPCA and Sauvetage Animal Rescue. They say the judge made mistakes in the ruling, allowing an unfair solution to a problem the city's neglect and mismanagement caused.
How? For decades now, they've been feeding the deer.
So as a result, the deer, like all the rest of us who are overfed, don't just become fat and happy, but we make a lot more babies.
Now, both sides say they would like to relocate the deer, but the city says too many would die if moved into the wild, while animal rights groups say almost all of them will die otherwise. Only 10 to 15 will be kept. The groups say at a minimum, young, healthy animals could be moved. But the clock is ticking. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Next, the first of many Thanksgiving for a newly arrived Ukrainian family. There are so many precious things to be thankful for this Thanksgiving weekend. Loved ones like your friends and family. But for one Ukrainian family who managed to escape Russia's gruesome war on their homeland, traveling all the way here to Canada, they're just thankful to no longer be in danger.
Here, when we found the apartment, I was so happy and I could sit and finally breathe out and sleep well, because I knew that we don't have to run. We're just grateful to universe that we can be here in safe place with such a wonderful people around, as Canadians.
When Kate Shushko, her mother and daughter fled their home in Ukraine and got to Canada, they had no host family to welcome them. They were just lucky to find a landlord who let them rent without a job or any references. Calgary is now their home, and now they're even helping another Ukrainian family displaced by war. All this as they prepare to celebrate their first Thanksgiving in Canada. We wish them a very happy first Thanksgiving in Canada, and we hope you're enjoying your Thanksgiving and time with your family. Maybe you're at a pumpkin festival like this one. This is in Richmond Hill, and it features everything from a costume contest to a pumpkin patch, pony rides, a rock climbing wall, pumpkin bowling, and even a pumpkin express train ride. And that's Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Farah Nasser. On behalf of our whole crew, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Tonight's Your Canada. Fall colors here at Sherbet Lake, Ontario. Neetha Garcha will be at the anchor desk tomorrow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.